That's all right. I'm okay. I'll just hover menacingly. Looks like the stream is up, so let's go and get started. Veer is out on holiday, so uh, I'll do my best to cover for Veer and do a terrible job of it. We're all mostly heads down on performance improvements right now, and planning for various end of year and kick off the next year things. Um, but keep an eye out on extra FPS. We're definitely trying to get extra FPS out by end of year, which is the next release after that should have some good performance improvements for some hardware that we haven't helped out yet. Like Intel GPUs haven't seen any significant improvements yet, and the work that's shipped so far. But we've found one of the major bottlenecks on Intel GPUs, and we're addressing that with what we're affectionately referring to as potato mode, um, which will disable HDR and various post effects, such as tone mapping, um, and even brings back the old like 80s airbrush style chrome reflection map um, when in that mode. Uh, so Intel HD 4000 is surprisingly popular, um, and surprisingly ancient and just surprisingly difficult to support to the point where Blender doesn't even support it. Um, but that's where we're at. Doing our level best to make sure that uh, everybody who can use Second Life on Firestorm 6617 can uh, upgrade to some version of 7X without uh, suffering negative consequences. That's what we're doing. We're chasing all the crashes that we can and all the performance issues that we can. So that's the mode we're in. Other than that, I don't have anything on the agenda, uh, unless Kyle or one of the other Lindens. What about the water? Terrible in what way? Is it the lack of reflections, or is it the lighting itself, the glossiness? Okay, so the lack of reflections. Um, we may address in a future release, but right now, if it's not keeping people from happily updating from 6617, it's taken a backseat to those issues. Okay, well that's good to know. If the water is the one thing that's keeping you in V6, then that would be an interesting story that we haven't heard too many times. Okay, so auto exposure tweaks and water. Heard. Oh wow, that is good to hear. Thanks for the feedback there. Yeah, Apple Silicon is, in particular, is really good. Um, I just wish Apple supported OpenGL a little bit better. Which is to say, at all. So for texture blurring, um, the viewer will detect that you're running low on VRAM, then it'll start down-resing textures. One of the main causes of poor performance was running out of VRAM. It is possible in some situations this will cause textures in the near view to stay blurry until you zoom in on them very closely. I think there are more improvements we can do there to change how the fall off curve works for things in the near view so you don't have to zoom right in on it. There used to be a mode where if you moused over a texture, it would load full res, but in testing, turns out that that functionality was causing most textures to load full res just if you casually use the viewer like people normally use the viewer, which would cause you to run out of VRAM, which would cause your frame rate to tank. That's interesting. So there are still some bugs that we're chasing where the viewer gets the wrong answer for how much video memory is available. If you open the texture console with develop consoles, texture console, Control Shift 3, there's a estimated free is the first number in that console, and if that disagrees with what GPU-Z or Task Manager or similar is reporting, then we have a bug, and a bug report would be appreciated, including the hardware. As far as minimal VRAM, it really depends on the scene and your draw distance. Like, we're committed to making the viewer run and be usable on hardware all the way back to NVIDIA GT 1030 or even earlier with like 2 gigs of VRAM. But textures will down res in order to avoid running out of memory. I think most scenes would be fine with 4 gigs and a 128 meter draw distance. But there is no upper limit on how much video memory the viewer can use. It's just when it runs out, it starts downscaling. And it'll start by downscaling things in the background and downscaling things that are off screen. But like in a crowd like this, which I'd say is larger than average, I'm essentially out of VRAM on a machine with 10 gigs of VRAM. I don't see any blurry textures, but I wouldn't be able to fit any more in a memory, if that makes sense. Yeah. So when it's working properly, it will use all of your available VRAM before it starts down-resing textures. And then if you put it in the background for a minute, it will unload textures. Or if you minimize it, it'll unload textures and free up VRAM, because presumably you want to use some other application if it's not in the foreground. But when it's in the foreground, it's going to take advantage of the hardware you have as best it can, which means using it. All right, so with Christie, what I know from those numbers is that you've got an integrated GPU. Wait, do you actually have a 24 gig video card? Okay, never mind. Go you. You're rocking. So on Windows, you can check in the Task Manager, the Performance tab, and then you click on GPU, and it'll show you how much VRAM is being taken up. Yeah, Avatar imposters definitely help performance a lot. VRAM, not as much, but some. Right, so the reported VRAM number, let's see, Quinn. So on devices with unified memory, usually we see the reported VRAM gets reported as the amount of system RAM. And then we watch the amount of system memory free. And when that gets low, we start unloading textures. So if you look at the texture console, there's also a sys-free number. That's how much system memory the viewer thinks is free. But the viewer also tries to keep its entire memory footprint under 16 gigs. So if you've got more than 16 gigs, sys-free is going to be 16 gigs minus however much memory the viewer is currently taking. And yes, if you can't tell, we've spent quite a lot of time trying to get this system robust enough to handle all the different scenarios out there. SL has an occlusion culling system. I'm not sure what you mean. Yeah, there's a debug display for that if you want to know if your build is taking advantage of occlusion culling. Develop render metadata occlusion, um, which I just turned on and it's broken in crowds. That's neat. But um, some of you have very large scaled meshes attached. Uh, hmm. But yeah, in that mode, if you see a red wireframe around something, then the viewer drew it. If the red wireframe doesn't get drawn, then the viewer didn't draw it. Um, by and that's sort of the X-ray view that we use to debug the occlusion culling system to see if it's working. And now I know I need to add support for rigged meshes to that so they don't explode out. That trick won't work in the near future, by the way. The trick where you make your rigged mesh huge and get your textures full res, that's patched in the next build of extra FPS. We're not changing LOD. So if you did that to hack LOD, shame on you, but we're stuck with it for now. For now. But we won't get we won't load your texture full res. We've been doing some testing on 2K bake to try to make sure that we're not making a bad situation worse by enabling 2K bake. And that's one of the things that came up was loading the high res texture too soon. So that should be fixed and good to go, but we're making absolutely sure before we do yet another thing that hurts performance. You know, it occurs to me that I haven't heard a single other person talk. Is anybody else talking and my voice is just busted, or am I the only one talking?
I
Nobody
think
else
you're
is
the only one talking.
talking, I think.
Okay, cool. Now I hear voices. Just checking. uh, yeah, voice is going through a transitionary period between Vivox and WebRTC. Um, we were hoping that it would have gone faster than this, but with as many people as there are staying on 6617, which doesn't have WebRTC support, we want to keep Vivox support alive for a bit longer. Yeah, sorry, I just unzipped my jacket.
If I can add to that real quick,
Yes.
Dave, eh, why is anybody still on Firestorm 719? And I ask that kind of knowing the answers that will be given, but like that is also a huge cohort of people that cannot use WebRTC, and there's no reason to stay on 719. Upgrade, upgrade.
Roll back from.
Joe, did you go back to 719 or did you go back to 6617? Like 6617 makes sense.
I went
Yeah,
back to
719, we're scratching our head at that. Like,
It was because texture animation was broken, Dave. For me, anyway, I'd been working on a massive project with texture animations, and then I logged in and everything was just stopped. So I rolled it back, and I just haven't bothered to go to update it yet. But apparently that's been fixed. So.
Okay, good to know. So people are going back to 7.1.10 for texture blurring, and because WebRTC hames on Linux. Ooh, a question about PBR and EEPs. Shoot.
Yeah, there is, isn't it? I think it's been marked as fixed down. Is there like a history? Has that avatar got like a history of all the feedbacks you've done?
I really wish you'd get a headset microphone. I can hardly understand what you're saying.
I'm so sorry. I'll get one. I promise I'll get one for next week, Dave. Please don't.
Okay. I'm trying real hard.
Okay.
But what was the question?
Was that to me, Dave?
Yeah.
What was the question? Is there a history of feedbacks? Like, if I make a feedback, because Dan was asking for the feedback on broken texture animations.
Yeah, it's all feedback.secondlife.com. I don't know what the link is to the existing texture animation issues. Someone here might have it, but in general, if you search for it or start filing an issue, then Canny search seems to be quite a bit better than GitHub or Jira search was.
So, yeah, I have a question about that. Was a feedback filed for it or a Jira? Because I thought that it was a Firestorm issue. So Firestorm has their own Jira, so I was wondering if there was a Firestorm Jira for the texture animation problem. Okay, great.
And to answer the question, I'll read the question. Have the default lights been transitioned fully? So, like, let's say someone's using an old WinLight like CalWL, shame on you, but I understand, and they're on a PBR viewer. Will it auto adjust, or do we have to do something manually on our end? I've been noticing a lot of places are still super blown out on PBR. So we have been attempting to auto adjust them, and I think we're about to stop attempting to auto adjust them and just try to make them look like they used to, which isn't great for PBR content, but is the least bad thing to do in the name of keeping the EEPs that people like looking the way people like. And I believe Gaines is working on that as we speak, which is why Gaines is not here. They're trying very hard to wrap that up so we can get her an extra FPS. And if it doesn't make it there, it'll probably go into a hot fix.
There isn't a history on the feedback, Canny, so you can't actually look up feedbacks you've left. I had to go through all my notifications to find it.
So Leonardo C on YouTube asks, why do not make an option in 7.1.11 or higher to use the old render engine when we are using old computers like Cool VL Viewer? We're kind of doing that right now with the potato mode. We're trying to make it look like the deferred renderer from 6617 and have it run as well or better than the forward renderer and the deferred renderer, because contrary to popular belief, the deferred renderer often runs better than the forward renderer. So when we're identifying hardware that's still having performance problems. The test we're doing now is put it in potato mode, compare it to 6617 forward and deferred. Whichever performs better, forward or deferred, that's our FPS target, to say that we fixed it on 7111. And we're taking some of the optimizations that we're finding there, some of the bottlenecks we're finding there, and moving them like sort of a trickle up effect, not a trickle down effect, but things that make the low end run really well also make the high end run even better. So we're kind of trickling up some of that to the high end where it can make things faster without making things look worse. I hope that answers the question and makes some sense. Leonardo also asks why they have to suffer with PBR and desktop version, but not on the mobile version. And that's saying it looks fine without PBR. So looks better, looks worse is subjective. Looks better, looks worse really isn't the reason we added PBR support. The reason we added PBR support was because we were trying to get a tool chain that made sense for artists who weren't experts in Second Life already. We were trying to make it so that you could import things from Substance Painter or Blender or other tools without having to recreate your material in Second Life. And it turns out that the industry standard for that is PBR. Specifically, the spec that we picked was GLTF. GLTF's main material system is PBR metallic roughness. That's why we did PBR. We could have done a much better job making sure it didn't hurt performance. We messed up there. I owe the community an apology. I did not take into account how bad performance would be on some hardware, and I didn't appreciate how much of that hardware was out there. So for that, I'm deeply sorry, and we're doing everything we can to correct that mistake. And as far as the aesthetic changes, we're listening to feedback and we're making changes and we're creating options. We're trying to find a good line between creating another scenario where we have like the forward rendering versus deferred rendering, like the ALM on or the ALM off schism. We're trying to avoid creating that situation again where artists have to make content for one pipe or the other while still making sure that Second Life runs well on as much hardware as possible. We do use beta breakers to test lots of different hardware, but let me run this query real quick. I've got a query that I've been using on our stats to track what hardware needs attention. And it is, I mean, imagine every configuration and every GPU and every operating system over the last 15 years. It's a lot. And like, for example, right now we're working very hard on Intel HD 4000 in particular, because that one in particular affects something like 5,000 residents. We're also bringing back support for OpenGL 3.1. We were cutting off OpenGL 3.2, but there are still a significant number of residents on OpenGL 3.1. That sort of thing. Uh,
Someone playing harmonica in the background, Dave.
yeah, that was an
Harmonica
alarm
playing
going
in the
off.
house.
Now I can't find a very.
Permanent bluesman in the background.
There she is. Okay. All right, 1,200 distinct GPUs. There are 13 flavors of Intel HD 4000. So, some of them are actually doing better than they used to, and some of them are doing much worse. So we're just mining the stats, and I'm sorry that we just we're in a situation where we just don't know until people start using it. It's we have ways of debotting. I think we have ways of de-alting too. But yeah, I mean, put some error bars on it, and we can still identify systems that are performing badly way outside the error bars. So we're definitely working on that. Right. So the performance issues that we're having aren't so far. None of them have really been related to PBR per se. Um, until you get into a really PBR heavy build, um, there's some optimizations we can do there to make things run a little better. But for the most part, the performance problems are coming from things like running out of video memory because we made updates to the texture streaming system and in order to take advantage of available VRAM so that textures wouldn't blur as often. That changed the system that hadn't been changed in a long time and made it better on some hardware and worse on others. But as far as the performance of PBR itself, like one of the nice things about going with the GLTF spec on that is the GLTF spec is designed to run on phones. It's not particularly resource intensive. Updating the reflection probes and sampling the reflection probes is the most resource intensive thing it does, and you can turn that off. Yes. Oh, and if you guys haven't heard, speaking of the mobile viewer, the mobile viewer is now open to everybody. You don't have to be Premium Plus. The on Premium Plus. So it used to be that you needed Premium Plus in order to log on to the mobile viewer. Now the mobile viewer is open to everybody. Maybe it was Premium or Premium Plus, but now it's, as far as I know, it's free. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's free. Okay, good. Just double checking. What's next on the roadmap? Was asked by your boy Grunty on YouTube. More performance, more crash fixes. The crash rate got neglected a bit, particularly if you're on Firestorm. Like your crash rate went up, not because of what the Firestorm team did, but that massive change came in and increased the crash rate. Like Firestorm was really stable before the PBR release, and now it's not as stable as it once was. Right. So crash hunting, performance hunting, that's basically what we're doing until we're happy that everybody is at least back to where they were before the PBR release. And then we'll revisit what was on the roadmap before. Yep. I am also itching for GLTF scenes. When I look at the long term, like not talking about short term, but I look at the long term future of the platform, there are two things that I see as risks that we have to address at some point. One of them is that Collada support is waning. So we need a tool chain that doesn't depend on Collada. And another one is that OpenGL support is waning. So we need a renderer that doesn't rely on OpenGL. Those are the not fun, must fix them things. And I still believe that GLTF is the best solution in a post-Collada world.
Is that going to sort out land impact at the same time, Dave?
Say again?
Is that going to sort out land impact at the same time? Because like I have to cut up like a 2,500 triangle tree into like 8 parts, and the actual process of getting a mesh and an acceptable land impact takes more time than making the mesh. Like there's all these hoops I have to jump through, and it's like it really detracts, I think, from what I can give people at the end of the day. What I would like to give people would be like, nice big luscious trees, not in 10 pieces and stuff, and then at a decent land impact. Because I'm by no means am I pushing a lot of triangles out there. I'm conscious and don't want to lag people's machines out. I've actually filled the scene up to see where I can I can fill a scene with so many plants, and then my frames per second tank. So I'm always building You know, like to be I'm tired, excuse me. Performant. I'm always building to be performant, but I'm getting penalized for it, and there's no reward for it at the same time, you know.
Yeah, and so the land impact equation is due for revision for sure. It's missing some key adjustments for particularly for large builds. Like large scale penalizes you too much, in my mind. As far as the LOD penalization, it doesn't actually penalize you for making LODs. It just, like, if you have a mesh without LODs, providing LODs for it will only make the land impact go down. Except for Animesh. Animesh is different. But for static meshes, adding LODs will only make it go down. Adding a one triangle LOD for your mid LOD will make it go way down, but that's cheating. So don't do that.
But that's what I meant by reward, Dave. Like, if I'm conscious and make a performant LOD tree, I'm still going to be, you know, penalized at the end of the day because somebody else is going to make a tree or not make a tree, download a tree, and then just upload it with no LODs, and they're going to have a much lower land impact. Which
right, and you say with no LODs, you mean by making it disappear entirely,
yes,
or turn into
yes, by setting everything to zero, and
even
even keeping the mesh, you know, like as one object as well, which I'm unable to do because it would be like 100 land impact for a 2,500 triangle tree.
Yeah, and I don't know a good solution to cheaters like that doesn't also hurt people who are doing it right. Like every time we step through this and we're like, okay, well, what is like a reasonable LOD step, right? Like how do we detect that somebody's cheating? There are all these cases where it's like, yes, I have this beautiful door which has thousands of triangles at the high LOD because it's got all this intricate molding, but at mid LOD, it's fine to show it as like a box. And that's perfectly fine. So there's no ratio that works for detecting cheating. You just have to rely on people saying, wow, this looks like crap because it's got no LODs and giving it bad reviews on the marketplace. Silhouette matching, that's a thought. Kyle has some answers to some of the mobile questions. Kyle, can you be sure to reread the question before delivering the answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. One of the questions was, when is PBR coming to mobile? I checked with my counterparts on that team, and it is on the roadmap, absolutely. And it is hopefully Q1 of next year. So that will definitely have an impact to what everyone sees once that has been rolled out. One of the other questions was, it would be great if we could experience this meeting on mobile in voice, and so that would mean switching this region over to using WebRTC. We can't do both, so I guess it's really an opinion of this group who wants the next meeting on WebRTC, or should we stay on Vivox for the time being?
Keep in mind that means in order to attend the meeting, you'd have to be on a 7.x viewer.
Yeah.
The voice stream can only go to one service or the other at a time, so 2 SEMS borders wouldn't help.
All right, I'm seeing a sentiment to stay on Vivox for the time being, and maybe a future meeting will have enough people over to WebRTC capable clients. All right, thank you. All yours, Dave.
Yep. Lots of talk of land impact. So the question about a prem going from 1 land impact to 29 land impact after hollowing it out, then shearing it. Well, I mean, you tortured the prem. The tortured prem gets tessellated quite a bit and creates triangles that the physics engine does not love. I'd probably guess that the 29 land impact was coming from the physics cost. Yeah, there should be a little info icon you can click on that tells you what the land impact breakdown is. There's 3 costs. There's a server cost, a physics cost, and a download cost. The download cost is playing double duty on download and rendering. And your land impact is going to be whichever one of those values is the highest. I don't know of that white avatar issue that Careless Whisper is talking about. Dan, Atlas, have you heard that one?
Yeah, I believe that's tracked.
Okay.
There's a related issue. I'm not sure if this is the same one, where there were 2 avatars would have a PBR material with the same bake texture, and they would be swapped and shared between them. That ticket has been fixed in develop. It is not in extra FPS at the moment. Looking at the PR to confirm.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the PBR items going white when going into edit mode. That's curious.
That's just if you have Blindfong on, I think, Dave. If you have like the
Oh, only when using a bake texture and the PBR material. Okay. What a tangled web we weave. Just imagining the code paths in my head of what series of events is firing. Okay.
Just wait, the Terminator comes for you, Dave. Do something so drastic in Second Life that it changes the whole course of human history. And the portal opens.
It's not so much spaghetti code as like a pachinko machine. Yeah, it's like a pachinko machine.
How did Philip start all those years ago?
I'm wondering about Sazi's question. Save something that was a singular item and the upload only gave you textures, no balls. Was that like, what did you do? Build, upload material or model? Okay, yeah, with the material upload, because we haven't done GLTF mesh or scene import yet, it only imports the materials, not the models. You have to, unfortunately, still have to import the Collada mesh separately. So earlier when I was talking about, there's a couple of big risks to, like, a couple of big things that we need to take care of just to keep SL usable for everybody. One of them is not relying on Collada, because Collada support is starting to waver, and different tools. I'm trying not to make any promises about GLTF, but if you go to one of the Rumpus room regions on Aditi, there's a develop GLTF open save upload edit menu, where you can preview importing GLTF scenes, and that will show you what all support is supported in the client side implementation so far, and animations are supported in that mode. I am trying very hard not to make promises about what parts of that will show up supported on the production grid. Given how the material import has gone this year. But ideally, yes, we'd support what's in the spec. Yeah, I think if you try to do a local preview now, it crashes unless you're on a region where those other buttons aren't grayed out, like the upload button. If the upload button is not grayed out, then you should be good to upload. If you go to Fractal on the beta grid, there's a bunch of stuff hanging out there, and we've been using that as a GLTF sandbox. But it's going to blow through all your video memory if you go there. Just fair warning. So we don't have texture streaming implemented for GLTF scenes. You had to just download all of the textures full res on the GLTF scenes. But nobody is working on that actively right now. We're 100% focused on addressing the issues that are keeping people on 6617. we're doing just enough to make sure it doesn't bit rot. Oh, weird. So you got the textures, but not the material asset. That's what you meant by the ball. Okay. The ball icon. The material icon. Okay. uh, now it makes sense. I have not seen that failure mode, but that is interesting because it does upload the textures first, and then after it's uploaded all the textures, it makes the material asset. That would be a good one to have on a bug report with the sample GLTF file. So it might be something specific to that GLTF file that we're not handling properly. Yes, the ORM slot, occlusion, roughness, metalness. That's the one that's not the normal map and not the base color. That looks like absolutely bonkers colors of your object. Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of like technical detail we're trying to make sure people don't have to know in order to import a material. So, oops. Yeah, definitely interested to get that GLTF file to see if it repros, if there's just something there that we're not handling right. Cool. Oh, and we are at time. Yeah. Thanks, folks. Everybody have a excellent Turkey Day.
Apart from the
See you next
turkeys.